Pharmaceutical companies are these behemoth monopolies that are run by greedy executives profiteering off the death and the sickness of everyone in the entire world. And patents are one of, if not the most lucrative tool they have in their toolbox of doing that. My name's Leisha. I'm a real-life lawyer, and I'm on a mission to demystify the law and how it affects your everyday life. Today I want to talk about the news that Pfizer came out with a vaccine that's allegedly 90% effective, and about how a patent on that vaccine could make them billions and cost the rest of us a crap ton of money. A patent on this vaccine could restrict the number of available doses and limit access to doses to those countries who have already swooped in, like the United States, and picked up over 75% of the available vaccine. Should big pharmaceutical companies be able to get patents on vaccines in the midst of a global pandemic and make billions of dollars on it? Let's talk about it. First, I'd like to offer the following disclaimer, and that's that I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. Nothing that I say should be construed as legal advice. You should always seek the advice of a licensed attorney if you have any legal questions. So in case you haven't heard, Pfizer is in stage 3 clinical trials for a COVID-19 vaccine that's proven to be 90% effective so far, which is huge because the government has said that they're looking for anything above a 50% effectiveness rate, and Dr. Fauci, our Lord and Savior, said that he would take anything over 75. So 90% is pretty unbelievable. However, in the wake of the coronavirus, all of the wealthiest countries have been able to swoop in and buy up all of the potential future vaccines, leaving only about 25% for the entire rest of the world. A huge reason for this is because of patents. So let's talk about patents. What is a patent? I go over this a little bit in my IP basics video that I'll link up above. Basically, a patent is any invention that's new, useful, and non-obvious, meaning that it's something innovative that no one else has thought of before that you've created. Patents allow you to register your creation with the federal government, and in exchange for disclosing this new discovery that you've made, you get to have a monopoly on it for 20 years, meaning you're the only one that can create it, use it, produce it, sell it, or license other people to use it for 20 years. And a number of things can be patented, including things like vaccines or scientific creations, new medicines, things like that, but other things can be patented as well. The Slinky had a patent on it at one point. You could invent a new stroller for a baby, that could have a patent on it. You could invent the pencil at some point, had to have a patent on it. The locomotive engine had a patent on it. Anything that's new that took innovation, creativity, and some sort of technical knowledge that's new and no one else has done before, you can register it with the Patent and Trademark Office, and if it is actually new, useful, and non-obvious, then you can get rights to it for 20 years. The reason that we do this is because we are trying to balance the interest in creating an incentive for people to innovate by giving them a monopoly for 20 years over anything that they create, but also trying to make sure that we're benefiting the public good. So once you've created your thing, you have to disclose it to the government, and then after 20 years, it becomes in the public domain, meaning that anyone in the public can take what you've created and make it themselves and then sell it. Aspirin used to be under patent back in the early 1900s, and then that patent ended, and then the aspirin drug went into the public domain, and that's why you can buy a million generic versions of aspirin. So you can see how getting a patent on something like a vaccine for a global pandemic could be problematic, because you are saying that this is my creation and no one else can make it for 20 years. It's greedy, and it also creates a monopoly, meaning that they can charge whatever they want for this medicine because they're the only ones that have it. Now, patents are country specific, so you have to apply in the United States to get a US patent, you have to apply in the UK to get a UK patent, etc., etc. There are international IP, intellectual property organizations like WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, that helps you organize this system of IP laws to make it a little bit more uniform around the world and to allow for people to submit one application and obtain patents from a number of countries all very efficiently. However, there is no international mechanism for intellectual property or patent enforcement. There are treaties that countries have signed where they've agreed to allow for certain patent rights, things like that, but there's really no teeth in or enforcement mechanisms for those international treaties. It's all just kind of the honor system. So there's nothing internationally that could bar the creation of a patent in something like a coronavirus vaccine. And due to these international organizations, someone like Pfizer would be able to apply for a number of patents in multiple countries and obtain patent rights so that no one in any of those countries could mimic their vaccine, generally for around 20 years. But what happens when you're in the midst of a global pandemic and you can't wait 20 years? No one really knows. So the World Health Organization has created what's called the COVID-19 Technology Access Pool, seeking out countries to join and pool resources and access to innovations and information about the COVID-19 virus, but also the vaccine, so that countries can share their knowledge and so that we can all fight this together. Of course, it's mostly the poorer countries who have joined because the richer countries don't care. And of course, heads of a number of pharmaceutical companies have called this effort by the WHO nonsense or dangerous, saying that asking people to give up their patent rights removes the incentive for innovation, as though saving hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives and lifting the entire world out of a global pandemic isn't incentive enough. I guess it's the money part that they need. There was a vote by the World Health Organization back in May calling for access to vaccine treatments and patents globally, and it was passed almost unanimously except for the United States, because our governmental representatives at literally every level of the government are easily bought out by big pharmaceutical companies who have absolutely obscene amounts of money. But the World Health Organization isn't even calling for big pharmaceutical companies to necessarily give up their patent rights. Instead, they're calling for them to give out licenses to use their patents to other companies so that more can start producing. So they can get the patent and then they just issue a license to certain companies to use the patent in certain ways to create the vaccine that we all need to survive. And the company that owns the patent can still make royalties off that. They still get a cut of the money that the other companies make from the creation of these vaccines. They just won't get the criminally large amount of money off the drugs that they're used to. And it is valid that they would at least want a return on their investment. Pfizer has reportedly invested around $2 billion in the creation of this vaccine. However, they're reportedly poised to make about $13 billion off the sale of that vaccine. Like, honestly, the number of people and industries that have made an absolute fortune off of this global pandemic should be criminal. Yes, I'm talking about Jeff Bezos. So there's that issue, but then it doesn't even take into consideration the fact that Pfizer cannot create on its own enough vaccines to cover the entire world. So not only are they going to be profiting off the vaccine, they're also going to be limiting severely how many doses of it are available in the world. And of course, those doses are going to go to the richer countries. And a handful of those rich countries, the United States included, have already bought up a ton of prospective doses of this vaccine, leaving 25% of the vaccines left for everyone else in the entire world. Now, there are a number of countries throughout the world that allow for what's called compulsory licensing, which just means that in certain situations, emergency situations, like the one they're in, they can require patent holders to license the patents to other companies so that they can create things like more vaccines, which potentially could happen here. Of course, the United States does not have compulsory licensing. The closest thing that they have to that requires companies to give out licenses if they were given governmental funding in the creation of the patented work. Pfizer has notably refused to receive any state aid, and they claim it's because they don't want to get tied up in bureaucracy. They want to be able to move swiftly to find a solution, but honestly, I'm 90% sure that it's just because they don't want to have to give away any sort of compulsory license to other people under this rule that we have here, and so that they can keep all the money for themselves and claim it as their property. But the problem with this is that even if your innovation isn't government funded, so much science is government funded that the odds are that in creating your new innovation, you've probably used underlying sciences that were funded by the federal government. So these big pharma companies are using things that at some point in time were funded by the federal government, creating new things, considering it their own personal property, and then vehemently protecting those IP rights at the cost of our health and wellness and lives. So big pharma loves to get government funding when it's convenient for them, and they love to bankroll a lot of governmental officials, and then they'll turn around and claim property ownership over the things that they create off the backs of taxpayers, and then charge taxpayers absolutely obscene amounts of money to get their hands on life-saving drugs. Also notably, Pfizer's competitors like Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca have all vowed not to make a profit off the vaccines that they will eventually develop for this pandemic. Pfizer has not. However, even those vows to not profit have been seen by some as a way to counteract the calls from, say, the WHO that's calling for governments to waive patent rights for big pharmaceutical companies. Basically, I'm assuming in their minds they're thinking, well, I would rather say I'm not going to get a profit on it and then self-regulate what that means than to put the power in the hands of the government. So they're basically doing it as a way to appease international organizations and government from actually regulating them. There's nothing pharmaceutical companies hate more than getting regulated. Regulations are very inconvenient when your main goal and apparently only incentive is to make a shit ton of money. However, the difference is notable in those competitors that have vowed not to make a profit. For example, AstraZeneca has been charging between $2 and $5 for doses of its vaccine, whereas Pfizer is charging $40 for its 2-dose vaccine. Now, you might say you're willing to spend $40 for a vaccine. I certainly am, but that's not accessible for a lot of countries to buy enough of those vaccines to treat their entire population, especially considering the fact that Pfizer is basically just bathing in money. Its revenue last year was $52 billion. And adding to all of this patent drama, last month, Pfizer was sued by another pharmaceutical company called Allele. Allele alleged that Pfizer, in the creation of its COVID vaccine, used a patented thing that Allele had invented that Allele owned the patent to. And so they're suing Pfizer, claiming patent infringement. Other than the filing of the complaint last month, there haven't been any other major developments in this case. It just goes to show how many pharmaceutical companies are just scrambling to get their piece of the coronavirus pie. And I guess this whole mess kind of leaves me with the bigger point, and that is that pharmaceutical companies are these behemoth monopolies that are run by greedy executives profiteering off the death and the sickness of everyone in the entire world. And patents are one of, if not the most lucrative tool they have in their toolbox of doing that. And I respect the importance of intellectual property laws, of course. I think that if you've created something, you've put the time and the energy into it, it should be protected. It sucks to see someone take something that you've put time, energy, and creativity into and use it without giving you credit or without getting any sort of compensation. Creativity and innovation should be protected. However, when the issue at hand is something as fundamental as human health, it's hard to see how greed and money should really be allowed to be a factor in that equation, and whether monetary incentive should even be allowed to play out in something as fundamental as healthcare. I want the people who are making and manufacturing the drugs that I'm taking to be incentivized by wanting to help the world, help people who are sick, make me feel better, stop my illness, stop the spread of a global pandemic. I want that to be the incentive, not monetary gains. These companies are incentivized because they know that they can make billions of dollars off a global health crisis. Something about that picture just doesn't make sense. And I don't know, am I being too starry-eyed about humanity by thinking that taking the monetary incentive out of the pharmaceutical industry would lead to more patient-centered care that isn't about the bottom line? Are humans capable of that? Is it possible that helping humanity could be enough incentive for people going forward to create things like life-saving drugs? What do you think? I'm at a loss. This seems like a mess, and I don't really see it going anywhere positive, at least in the United States. I think there's going to be a lot of people in a lot of other countries who are going to lack access to very fundamental drugs that will lead to the deaths of a lot of people in lower income countries. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them down below. I hope you found this video informational and that you're staying safe out there. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Hit the subscribe button below if you want to hear more from me. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Wear a mask. Goodbye.